Hello there my friends and welcome back to a new hands-on preview. While a lot of manufacturers are trying to plan powerful hardware for gamers and content creators, or well, people who work with their laptops, not all of them are succeeding when it comes to designing a chassis that is appealing not only to the hardcore gamers amongst us. This cannot be said about Acer and their all-new Predator Triton 17X, which marks the absolute high-end option in the company's gaming lineup. And I really have to give it to those guys. This puppy looks and feels simply amazing. We had the chance to take a look at an early engineering sample of this absolute powerhouse of a notebook, and I will take you guys along for the ride. Before we get to the exterior, let me quickly walk you through the spec sheet. The Triton comes with Intel's Raptor Lake i9-13900HX and an RTX 4090 running with up to 175 watts. Video and photo editors will be pleased with up to 64 gigs of DDR5-5200 memory and up to 4 TB of NVMe storage running in RAID 0. On the display side of things, you can choose between either a 17-inch 16x10 QHD Plus screen running at 240Hz or a mini LED variant speeding things up to 250Hz while delivering up to 1000 nits of maximum brightness. And guys, this screen already looks very promising. One of the first highlights of the new Triton is definitely its design. The all-metal chassis is exceptionally solid and the matte texture also feels the part. The base basically feels like a solid chunk of aluminium and the metal-clad lid is barely flexing at all. While the whole keyboard assembly is moved to the front to make room for a sort of flow-through cooling design with 3 fans and a vapor chamber, Acer smoothed out the upper edge of the chassis to make typing for longer on the Triton much more comfortable. Along the front of the base unit they also added silver colored speaker grills that break up the clean aesthetics while still keeping the classy industrial look of the 17X. Apart from the keyboard and the laser cut logo, you will not find any additional RGB lighting. And this one will definitely not give you any raised eyebrows in the office, in a cafe amongst the Apple crowd, and I'm sure even gamers will appreciate the more subtle look. Speaking of the keyboard, while some of you might miss the numpad, the slightly recessed keys also look very clean. And Acer added some additional function and media buttons below the power button. The switches themselves feel pretty good with a decent amount of travel. Even though I must admit I would prefer a more tactile bump or maybe even a mechanical option. Typing is pretty quiet though, so I can understand why they decided against that. The touchpad is big enough without taking up too much space below the keyboard. The overall chassis dimensions are somewhere between a classic 17-incher and all the new 18-inch offerings. The Triton is also pretty thin without being too extreme to immediately raise concerns when it comes to the cooling potential. The metal construction and the vapor chamber of course play their part when it comes to weight, and with around 3 kg, the Triton is not exactly lightweight. When it comes to ports, the new Predator is alright, bordering on underwhelming. While a wired 2.5 Gigabit Ethernet port is very nice, 2 USB-Cs and a pair of USB-As are hardly breaking any connectivity records. Both USB-Cs are Thunderbolt 4 and support power delivery with up to 100 watts. And on the right you can find an HDMI and a full-size SD card reader. This one could be particularly interesting for creators since Acer claims transfer speeds above 950 MB per second. In the display department things get very interesting as well. While this is a pre-production unit, I cannot yet do any measurements, so we will have to save that for a full review. Make sure to subscribe so you do not miss that one once we get our hands on a retail sample for the Triton. While Acer's spec sheet lists a non-HDR regular IPS panel running at 240Hz, I have the mini LED option right here. It refreshes a tiny little bit faster with 250Hz and comes with 1000 backlighting zones, reaching a maximum brightness of up to 1000 nits. At least according to Acer, but in my subjective impression I would say it can easily keep up with other high-end screens we have seen lately. The QHD Plus resolution of 2560 by 1600 is still crispy enough for the screen size, and in general this one is definitely a very nice balance between the regular 16:9 17-inch screens of the past and the massive new 18-inch options. Apparently, the display can cover up to 100% of the DCI-P3 color space, which usually means full coverage for sRGB as well, and some pretty good numbers for Adobe RGB. I hope up until launch, Acer will be able to implement additional profiles like sRGB for video creating, for example, and maybe even follow ASUS's example and integrate a toggle to use the independent mini LEDs as a single traditional backlighting zone. Then this display might tick all the boxes for reliable on-the-go creative work. Alright guys, let's talk performance. As I said, this is an engineering sample, so I cannot really take this puppy through our benchmarking parcours. But given from what we have seen from Intel's i9-13900HX, I do not expect any negative surprises for the Triton. Through the grills in the top you can see the free fan design, and with the corresponding vents on the other side and some very generous amounts of radiator area around the edges of the chassis, I have relatively high hopes for the good looking 17-incher. But of course we will have to wait and see once we get a final review sample. The same holds true of course for GPU performance. It seems like the Triton 17X will only be available with Nvidia's flagship, the RTX 4090 Mobile. And it will be allowed a maximum power target of 175 watts in this one, which will definitely be plenty of horsepower for games as well as more workstation focused applications like Blender or Resolve 18. In fact, I'm very curious of how this one performs for our video production, since I must admit this would be something I would be personally interested in as a traveling creator. Cooling all of this will be a deciding factor for the success of this one though. Whenever a manufacturer releases a super powerful notebook that looks clean and is pretty thin, some companies like to use this as an excuse to limit performance under heavy loads severely. But from what I have seen so far, and again this is an engineering sample, the Triton looks very promising, both from the overall level of performance it delivers and the tuning for the different performance levels in Acer's Predator Sense software. And how this translates in runtimes away from the wall and especially to fan noise, we will test hopefully very shortly. And I am afraid this will be it for today already. Please let me know what you think about the new Acer Predator Triton 17X in the comments, and if you have any input, what you want us to test in the full review, please let us know as well. If you liked our quick hands-on for this one, feel free to hit that like button and maybe even consider subscribing to stay up to date on all things laptops here on YouTube. Thanks a ton for watching, my name is Alex, you have been incredible and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one. Take care.